The 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews is known as the Hebrew Gallery of Faith. If you read through there, it's like a hall of fame of the Old Testament heroes of the faith, like Noah and Abraham and Moses and many others. These are people who endured hardship and opposition, yet remained faithful to God. These are people that God worked through to accomplish great things, and they left us a heritage of faith. These are people who believed the promise that God had made, even though they personally did not live to see that promise fulfilled, because it was fulfilled in Christ. And we today get to reap the benefits of that promise and of their faithfulness. After he gets done with that whole list, he says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Now there is a lot to unpack in those verses. We could talk about that great cloud of witnesses that he mentions at the beginning of verse 1, referring back to those heroes of the faith that he talked about in chapter 11. For us, that would also include all the saints of the ages that have gone before us, they're like the crowd cheering us on. It's not so much, though, that they're watching us as that we look to them and draw strength and examples from them. We draw inspiration from them. It's almost like, it's a football game and we're playing in our home stadium and they're like the 12th man. There's some extra juice you get playing in front of the home crowd. Or we could talk about all of the times that this passage used words like we and us and our, and how it's about living in community. We're not just a bunch of individuals competing in this race on our own. We're in this together. We encourage and motivate one another. I could also geek out on the Greek and say that when he says, "let us throw aside," that "let us" part indicates that the verb is what's known as a hortatory subjunctive. Anybody? A hortatory subjunctive? No, okay. It's kind of out there in Greek grammar, but it's a kick in the pants to say, you really ought to be doing this. Get your mind in the game, get your head in the game, get your body in the game. Let's do this. Or we could talk about what is the joy set before him. What does that mean when we're talking about Jesus enduring the cross for the joy set before him? What is it that's motivating him to endure the cross? And what does it mean when it says scorning the shame? How does that inform us and motivate us? How does it apply? And how does him enduring opposition from sinners, how does that apply to us? But unfortunately, we don't have time today to get into all of that, because there's at least a full sermon in each one of those directions. So we're going to instead zoom in on a few verses, or a few words in the middle of these verses. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. And I'm going to pick up on the imagery of athletic competition, the kind of focus and streamlining and training that's required to compete at a high level. And the writer of the Hebrews uses the image of runners in a race, like in his perspective, like the ancient Greek games, the Olympic Games. Here, this is the start line of the Boston Marathon, so a little different. But I'm going to switch the imagery, and I'm going to use the metaphor of cycling. Because why not, okay? Because I really think that the writer of the book of Hebrews would have used cycling if bicycles had existed in the first century. But nobody thought, I don't know how this happened, but nobody thought for another 18 centuries to put two wheels in line on the same vehicle. And when they did, the development of the bicycle became a prime example of throwing off everything that hinders and entangles. And trust me, professional riders can teach us a lot about perseverance, about focus, about discipline, and just the development of the bicycle itself. Over the years, the machines have gone through all kinds of research and development, and the training regimen, and the nutrition, and the hydration, all the stuff that goes in to high-level professional cycling. But in the early days of the bicycle, things were not very promising. This monstrosity was famously claimed as the first approximation of a bicycle. It's basically a wooden hobby horse on wheels. No pedals, no steering, no brakes. You just throw a leg over this thing and start running. And why? It was supposedly created in 1790 by a French nobleman. Turns out that it was actually a hoax. It was perpetrated by a French journalist 100 years later. He made up the nobleman and everything. His motivation was to claim that the French had invented the bicycle, when in fact it was a German who in 1817 first marketed a two-wheeled, human-powered vehicle. Now, this thing is still very heavy looking. I haven't had the privilege of trying to pick it up, but it looks pretty heavy. It's probably would have been very frustrating and uncomfortable at best. It still doesn't have any pedals. It does have metal tires. If you look closely, there's a rim of metal, kind of like on a wagon wheel, on the outside of those wooden wheels. There's very limited steering. And there is a very lame attempt at braking, the little lever with the rope going to the back wheel there. But you look at that and you say, well, that kind of looks like a bicycle. You can kind of start to see that. And the next few decades brought various innovations. Most of them were pretty bad ideas, like this one. A lot of them involved 3 or 4 wheels because people were skeptical that you'd be able to actually balance on 2 wheels. And if you'd seen my mother attempt to ride a bicycle, you would understand their skepticism. Sorry, Mom. In 1858, along comes the Velocipede. That has to be the best bike name ever, the Velocipede. It has pedals that are attached to the front axle. It has a spring-mounted seat for comfort. Limited steering. If you turn the wheel too far, your legs are in the way. There is an attempt, a pretty lame attempt, at braking. But again, we're starting to look like a modern bicycle. And you could look pretty stylish riding one of these things. Okay? I mean, that's a sharp-looking man right there. Next, the need for speed took bike technology down a really strange path in the 1860s with the high-wheeler, or also known as the penny farthing. This is not a good idea. The only way to slow this thing down was to try to turn the pedals backwards. Good luck with that. But the reason for that huge wheel is a higher gear. You get more distance covered with the same pedal revolutions. You still have all of the problems of steering, and again, no braking at all on this. A few reckless, I gotta tell you, this is worth your time. Go look up on the internet an essay by Mark Twain called Taming the Bicycle. It is hilarious. It's his attempt to learn to ride one of these things. It failed spectacularly, but worth a read. It's not very long. A few recklessly brave souls actually attempted to race these things. And if you look closely, the expressions on their faces, they look pretty proud of themselves. They're pretty smug. They think this is going to be a lot of fun. But attempts at riding these penny farthings often ended in disaster and regret, if you could even get on the thing. But then in 1885 comes the safety bicycle. Both wheels are the same size, there's better steering, the position of the rider is a lot more ergonomic on the bike, the pedals are in the middle, attached to sprockets and a drive chain. It's roughly the same format as today, but as you can see, there's a whole lot of things that still need to be changed. And technological advancements came very rapidly over the next few years. They started changing the design of the frame and the materials used and how they would extrude the pipes for the frame. They came up with adjustable spokes, which means that you can twist a little thing up around the rim and get the wheel to line back up if it gets out of whack. That's pretty important. Inflatable tires came along. It's hard to think that there was a time when there were no inflatable tires, but that made a huge difference. The freewheel hub, to be able to not have to pedal all the time. In early bicycles, it was just a fixed gear on the back hub. So if the back wheel is moving, the pedals are moving. And so they invented a way to allow you to freewheel, coast down hills. And then eventually somebody thought, we ought to be able to push back on the pedal and make it stop. Like that bike that you learned how to ride on, pushing back on the pedal. Bicycles became a massive cultural phenomenon in the 1890s. Bicycles allowed individuals to travel independently for work or recreation. It helped to liberate women from the constraints of Victorian clothing and society. This, of course, created a huge backlash among men who fabricated all kinds of ridiculous reasons why it was not proper or safe for women to be riding a bicycle. Fortunately, not all men agreed, and women thrived in their newfound freedom. There was fierce competition among manufacturers for the market share. There were constant improvements being made to materials and design and innovation. People could not resist the urge to race one another on bicycles, which drove the demand for even more technological advances and even more interest in racing and watching elite athletes race. So in 1903, a French newspaper editor got an idea to sponsor a race around the nation of France. You may have heard of a Tour de France, started in 1903. This is from that race. They rode 6 stages, covering a total of 1,500 miles, which, if you do the math, comes out to over 250 miles per stage. They would rest for a day or 2 or 3 in between. There were no major mountains, but there were lots of hills, and no brakes were allowed. Okay, there was a single fixed gear, with pedal moving. And the only way to manage the speed going down hills was to attempt to kind of put some backward pressure as the pedals are forcing their way forward. Every rider had to carry all their own tools, their own tires and tubes, and whatever food and water they were going to need. They were not allowed to have any help whatsoever. 250 miles a day. I'm amazed that biking survived, honestly. Technological advances came very slowly because the organizers of the race wanted it to be a real test of men. And so by 1913, they were allowing hand brakes, and they had 2 gears. You could stop, get out a wrench, undo the back tire, take it off, flip it around the other way, and there's a different sized cog on that one, and that's how you changed gears. Okay? Not easy. There was I lost my place here. The leader of this race, pretty dapper looking guy. That thing that's strapped around his shoulders, that's an inner tube that he's carrying in case he needs it, which he probably will. This guy lost over 4 hours on one mountain stage because his fork broke, and he had to find a blacksmith shop and fix his own fork. And he couldn't allow someone else to do it. And then he got penalized another 3 minutes because a judge was sitting there watching him and noticed that a 7-year-old boy was running the bellows on the forge. And he ended up losing the race because of that. By 1923, there were a few more innovations that were allowed. The riders could even get mechanical assistance from their team cars that were following. But it wasn't until 1937 that the rear derailleur was allowed. Now, it had been around for quite a while to be able to the thing in the back to change the gears. It had been around, but they wouldn't allow them to use it until 1937. That made a huge difference going uphill or downhill. But the overall pace of what was allowed was very slow. Even though the innovation was going outside this, the race directors wanted to keep it real, okay? Even though the race kept on getting bigger and bigger and taking them up higher mountains, more mountains, there were incremental improvements over the years. This is from 1951. You have to look pretty close to see any real differences in the bikes. Here's 1975. Color photography now, but pretty much the same bikes. 1982. What fascinates me about this is there's still no helmets on these guys. In spite of the fact that there have been multiple fatal crashes, nobody wants the extra weight or the aerodynamic drag, they think, of a helmet. And so nobody's wearing them. Attitudes toward technology and the advance of it changed gradually, and they were forced. There was a kind of a watershed moment in the 1989 Tour de France. These two guys, this guy over here wearing the yellow jersey, which is the leader's jersey in the Tour de France, his name is Laurent Fignon. Okay, he's a Frenchman, winning a French race, that's a big deal. This guy, his name is Greg LeMond. He's an American. Okay? They are neck and neck. They're on the same team, by the way. And they are neck and neck. The lead is going back and forth between them during the Tour de France. After 20 stages out of 21, Fignon is ahead by 50 seconds. They've ridden almost 2,000 miles, and his lead is 50 seconds. And the last stage is going to be a time trial, which is where instead of just all the racers going at once, they have a start house and they let them go one at a time, separated by a minute or two, and each rider is timed against the stopwatch. They're not allowed any help. They can't get behind another rider or anything. It's every man against the clock. Well, Fignon didn't think technology was a big deal, so he just rode his regular road bike. Greg LeMond had designed this machine to ride. You notice there's actually even a difference in the size of the tires, much larger gearing, the position on the bike, the way the handlebars are. He's in a much more aerodynamic position, and he's wearing a helmet for aerodynamics. He was behind by 50 seconds going in. He won this stage by 58 seconds, which means that he won the Tour de France, 3 weeks, 2,000 miles of riding, by 8 seconds. The French were furious. Well, the Tour de France has seen plenty of close finishes over the years, none closer than this. Oh, I got to say, this guy right here. This is Remco Evenepoel. He's a Belgian rider. He is the 3-time reigning world champion of the time trial. His bike is a little bit different from Greg LeMond. Little things have changed. Hugely, actually, over the years. We don't have time to go into all of what he's got going on his bike there. Well, the Tour de France has seen a lot of close finishes, none closer than in 2017, stage 7. On this stage, racing for 4.5 hours, they covered 132 miles, which is a fairly normal stage of the Tour de France. It ended in a sprint. Try to imagine this. You've been riding for 4.5 hours, 132 miles, moving along pretty well, and at the very end of it, you reach speeds of over 46 miles an hour on a bicycle on flat, level ground. There was a photo finish. And those two riders in front there were separated by 3/10,000ths of a second. The distance between them was 5 millimeters, about 3/16ths of an inch, after 132 miles. Very small improvements can make the difference between winning and losing. Between 2012 and 2019, this team, Team Sky, they dominated the Tour de France. They won 7 of those 8 tours with 4 different riders. Here is Bradley Wiggins. Afterwards, since he was the first British man to win the Tour de France, Queen Elizabeth made him a knight. This is Sir Bradley Wiggins now. Okay? Then you got Chris Froome, who won it in 2013, 15, 16, 17. Here is Geraint Thomas winning it in 2018, and Egan Bernal winning it in 2019. By the way, I know, I spend a lot of time thinking about bikes and watching bike races, have for years, get used to it, okay? There was a team philosophy that they had. It was called marginal gains. Little tiny improvements. They would relentlessly pursue marginal gains to make small differences that added up. And it worked until all of the other teams in the pro peloton started doing the same thing. Well, Team Sky no longer dominates. In fact, they've had some pretty lean years, and they've changed names a couple of times since then, different sponsors. But other teams have taken over. The UAE and Jumbo Visma or Visma Lisa Bike, depending on what time period and what sponsors. There's 2021, the same winner, Tadej Pogačar, this guy in the middle. Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard. The last 5 tours, they've been first and second. They've swapped back and forth. They're going to be in the tour coming up in July, and I can't wait. But there have been all kinds of improvements in in 2022, Jonas Vingegaard won. He won again in 23, and then we're back to Tadej winning in 2024 and 2025. There have been all kinds of improvements, from altitude training to nutrition to hydration to tracking their sleep. The broadcasters will tell you the sleep data of a particular rider and how he recovered from the previous day's ride. They've made this into a science of how you prepare for the next day. The materials that go into the bikes, the engineering, the aerodynamics. Teams will hire scientists to study these things intensely and to constantly develop better and newer ways of riding a bike. It's like an arms race, except it's more of a legs race. That was supposed to be funny, by the way. The bikes themselves have undergone tremendous changes. 1960, this is the state of the art. It's got a steel frame. It's got cables that are exposed out in the wind. You've got your shifters down here on the down tube, which you have to reach down, to take a hand off the handlebar and reach down and monkey with that thing to get it in just the right spot. You've got several things. There's toe clips on the pedal. You've got a thing that it's upside down right now because it turns, but you put your foot up into that thing and that holds it in place. There's a much better system for that now. So this was the state of the art. And then by the 80s, they started messing with aluminum frames, but pretty much the same design. By the time you get to 2000, this is the kind of bike that you want. You've got a carbon fiber frame, more gears, the cables. If you look closely, they kind of come down here and they're routed. They have stopped putting the whole cable. They just have a piece of the wire coming down, and they're trying to eliminate as much wind resistance as possible. It's got deeper rims. The shifters are no longer on the down tube. They're actually right there in the brake levers. They're integrated in with the brake levers. That's the way it's done now. It's much more streamlined. By 2016, the top riders were on something like this. It's lighter, stiffer, carbon fiber. The tubes of the frame are shaped for aerodynamics. Even the seat post is shaped to be aerodynamic. If you go back to 2000, that's just a round pole, okay? By 2016, you now have a thing that's shaped for aerodynamics. The spokes are flat for aerodynamics. The rims are deeper for aerodynamics. The cables are routed inside the frame. They aren't out in the wind at all, okay? By today, this is what makes bike geeks drool. This is the Pinarello Dogma F. It has advanced frame geometry. The gears are shifted not with cables, but with electronics. There's a little servo on the derailleurs that moves it precisely back and forth. It has more gears. It has hydraulic disc brakes. The tires are wider to smooth out the road and give better grip in bad weather. This thing weighs less than 15 pounds. And it has a price tag, a little over $15,000. And if you want, I can send you a link to this if you're looking for something for me for Christmas. This would be great, okay? There's a thing from their website. I just got to read this to you. This blows my mind. The down tube has been re-engineered. The down tube is this guy right here. The down tube has been re-engineered to reduce thickness, improving frontal aerodynamic performance and decreasing aerodynamic drag. In addition, the aero keel bottom bracket, this thing down here, the bottom bracket incorporates a 3.5 degree rotation of the down tube, improving aero efficiency by 1.2%. 1.2%. That's a long way to go for a tiny little gain. But if we're going to talk about aerodynamics, we've got to talk about this guy. This is a bikes rider named Victor Campenaerts. He is Belgian. He is the king of bike geeks, okay? This guy, in 2019, he set the 1 hour record, which is this weird things that bike riders do. They will go to an indoor bike track, and they get a rolling start, and then they're on a stopwatch for exactly 1 hour, and they see how far they can go. He went over 34 miles in 1 hour. That record was broken, and it's almost up to 36 miles an hour now. It was broken in 22 and again, and a couple of times since then. But this rider, he is quite the character. He will come up during a race. He will come up next to another rider from another team and start coaching them on their aerodynamic position, on how they can improve the ergonomics of their riding. He's insane about this. There's a funny thing that bike riders do. I don't do this, but they shave their legs because it's supposed to make less aerodynamic drag. It's always been just assumed that if you have nice smooth legs that you're better aerodynamically. Well, he actually went into a wind tunnel and tested it, and he discovered that a little bit of stubble actually helps. He even has wind tunnel tested his mustache to make sure it's okay. This guy is obsessed with aerodynamics. Why? Why would anybody go through all of this and put themselves through all of this? I love this picture. This is a 19-year-old rider named Tim Rex. He is this is Victor Campenarts, by the way, the same guy we just saw. He's on the same team. They're going up a mountain, and he is trying to empty the tank to help his team leader, who's a few behind there, to get the aerodynamics of going up the hill better. And he is just absolutely killing himself to make that happen. Why would anybody put themselves through all of this? Why would they do all this research and development just to shave off a few grams or make minuscule improvements in aerodynamics? Why would they torture themselves to train their bodies and their minds to be able to perform at such a high level? Well, here's why. Because the mountains can be pretty steep. And the sprints can be terrifyingly fast. And huge crowds line the mountains. This is actually a fairly small crowd lining the mountains to enthusiastically cheer them on. And the competition is fierce. And they want to win. Pro cyclists have a lot to teach us about sacrifice and streamlining and research and engineering and training. They do it to win a bike race. Think about the race that we're running and the prize that we're trying to attain. Most Christians have gotten pretty casual about their spiritual walk. Now, whether that describes you or not, that's a conversation for you and God. And I encourage you to have that conversation. But I think it is fair to say that most American Christians have gotten pretty casual about our spiritual walk. Our lives tend to be cluttered with things that hinder us spiritually. Far too often we find ourselves entangled in sins of all varieties. Most of us can't even be bothered to sustain our effort or to persevere in difficulty. We're too busy going along with the flow to even be aware that there's a race marked out for us. And worst of all, we take our eyes off of Jesus. Now, I'm not going to stand up here in judgment of anyone today, because I confess I have been guilty of this as well. But it doesn't have to be that way. God has given us His Holy Spirit to cleanse us, to empower us, to guide us, to counsel us, to teach us, to remind us of what Jesus said. And if we will allow Him, the Holy Spirit will help us to throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles us. And He is more than able to give us the strength and the stamina to persevere in difficulty. If we pay attention, He will show us the course of the race that is marked out for us. If we give Him control, He will keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, focused on Jesus, allowing God to reshape us into the image of His Son. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Amen.